Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava, and today I am finally returning to making new bhakti videos after a long hiatus due to the New Year rush and my Kickstarter and a lot of other things that I've had going on. So I'm getting back to making bhakti videos now. We'll try to be in the groove of releasing a video a week as I had been. So today I'm taking a question that comes in from the audience. And the question is this: what makes Krishna a person? Or you could put this another way: what makes God a person? They say, I'm trying to understand the concept of Krishna as a person or personality, possibly too hard, and looking for clarity around this. I've read about Krishna having a spiritual form, which is different from our fleshy material form. I've also read about Krishna taking all kinds of forms, including the somewhat terrifying universal one. So maybe the form he takes isn't what makes Krishna a person? If so, what would that thing that makes him a person be? Really great question. So there are a variety of different forms that Krishna takes. And the fact that Krishna has a form at all is a part of what it means that we say Krishna is a person, but it's not all of what it means. What we mean at the most basic level when we say that God is a person or that Krishna is a person is that God is a personal being, which means a relational being, which means like you or me, a being, or the foxes or squirrels out in the woods, or the fish in the lake, or even things like mountains or stars. God, in other words, is a living being. And so, um, and in that sense, God is independent from all other beings. All other beings are contingent upon God, but God is independent from all other beings. So what that's doing, in a sense, philosophically, is it's giving us an understanding of how we are also individual beings that's why and how we have souls, because a little portion of us is the same as God in the sense that we are each individual, unique persons, spirit, souls, beings. Okay, so that's the first thing that's meant when we say that Krishna or God is a person. Krishna is a being. Now, what we mean when we say, well, what kind of being is Krishna, or what is the thing that makes Krishna a person? It is the same thing. The most basic way that we understand God as a person, to reiterate, is the same way that we understand ourselves to be people. I'm Achyuta, and you're you because of the indwelling spirit soul, the ontological essence, the eternal, immortal beingness that is apart from any other being, that makes you completely unique. Now, us spirit souls, we're like contingent beings. We're beings that have our being rests on this divine person's being, or it has its origin or roots in that being. But we're all, the most basic thing to realize is that we're all beings. And that means that reality is relational, which means that spiritual life is about the relationship between the individual being and the supreme being. Or a supreme might sound too lofty. You could say the source, the being that is at the source of all things, the source being. Source just makes it sound impersonal and abstract, like it's just some source of abstract energy. That's not it. When we say source, in Krishna Bhakti, what we're talking about is the original person, the eternal, original, immortal, divine person that possesses also all qualities, all goodness, all truth, all knowledge, all beauty, all renunciation, all modesty, all humility, all sweetness, all qualities that God has in perfect qualities, in the perfect resolved whole. So the other thing that makes God a person is not only that God is its own individual being, but that it has all attributes, all qualities that you, in all of creation, all qualities in creation are in some ways a small, minuscule reflection of the perfection of those same variegated qualities that are in the nature and character of God. All qualities that we may judge as good or bad or this or that are perfectly resolved in truth, beauty, and goodness in God. So that's what makes God a person at a more qualitative level. The other thing it's really important to remember is that God, or we could say Krishna, when we say that Krishna has form, what we mean is we mean a few different things by form, not a material form, right? A material form is impermanent. Although all material forms are a reflection of God and therefore are divine, but God's form is spiritual in nature, as is our own spirit soul, which is to say that God's form is beyond the dualities present in material nature. And so for that reason, it's really hard to conceptualize like what is a spiritual form. And this is also the same reason that it's hard to conceptualize why there is a spiritual form is the same reason that it's difficult to understand, or I should say that it's the same reason that it's hard to conceptualize a spiritual form is the same reason that God has innumerable names and forms. It is said about, Krishna says about himself in the Bhagavad Gita that I have unlimited qualities and I have unlimited forms, innumerable names, more than can be counted. And but what we're saying is not that. So it's not that we're seeking out one particular form and nothing else. God shows himself through endless variegated forms in creation. In fact, in the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita, it's said that that Krishna descends and takes avatar form, at different intervals for different reasons and purposes, especially to, put things back to right when people start forgetting who they are and who God is. And that avatars come back for that reason into the material universe, and they take many different forms. Also, Krishna makes it very clear that in other planets all around the universe, this is happening. And there are an unlimited number of different forms that Krishna takes. So when we say that God is a person, we mean that God is a being. And like a peacock tail with 1,000 eyes, God's form is itself multivalent. It's more like, you could say it's more like looking at a jewel that's constantly turning, where there's just multifaceted, multidimensional ways of seeing and experiencing the form of God. It's that unique, it's that beautiful, it's that true, it's that perfect. So, but God is still a being. And in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Bhagavatam, two Bhakti texts, it's also clear that one of the reasons that God takes particular forms is to meet each being where they are at. So when you think about, well, why is it that Krishna takes the form of a little cowherd boy, in Vrindavan? Why does he take this little form, this, little boy form? Well, in part, it's explained that he takes a form that's very sweet and very familiar and very common to everybody, a little boy, specifically because intimacy and love of God and getting to know the personal form of God in your heart and in life, whether in the spiritual dimension or in this dimension, if we see God in that universal form, as Arjuna finds out in the Bhagavad Gita, we'll just get completely blown away. It's just too much. And how can you establish intimacy between yourself and a being like God if seeing God just completely flips your lid, because it's the form of God and the person of God are so multivalent and multidimensional? So, for that reason, God also takes particular forms so that intimacy can be established. And there's something called Yoga Maya that comes and actually deludes both God and his devotees into, in some ways, forgetting that great, grand, opulent, multidimensional universality, which, as you mentioned in your question, can be rather terrifying. So God comes to us in forms that are familiar, that are comfortable, so that we can also, feel safe, because we're very small little beings, and we are made of the same substance and source as our creator. And so, we have each of us are also beings. And think about how you are as a being. What is it that defines you as a being? Is it your arm? Well, if you got your arm cut off, would you still be there as a being? You know what I mean? Take how many body parts do you have to take away, right? Before your form is still you. So form is really just a way of saying that God as a form is a really way of saying that God is a personal being that's multidimensional and that has personhood, individuality. And that's what grants us each of our individuality. So I hope that this has been helpful. I'm by no means these are not my original thoughts. This is my re-articulation of what I've understood in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, and this question about what makes God a person, and why does God take on so many different forms. Um, the form that God takes, the way that God's form is revealed to us, is also a part of why japa and mantra meditation are so important for spiritual life. Because as we imbibe the names of God in daily practice, in chanting, taking bhakti very deeply into our lives, then not only do we start to just get little glimpses, and we start to come into association with the personal form of God, but we also start to understand our own personal form. And that's a beauty as well, right? Our own beautiful nature that starts to come out when we understand ourselves in light of the form of God. That's when the alchemy of this relationship between the soul and the God emerged. So we also have to discover what it means for us to be people, for us to be a person, which isn't to say my temporary personhood in this lifetime. It means, who am I? What's my personality as an eternal being? And in Bhakti, it's also said that there's a whole variegatedness about, our beings are just as variegated and beautiful and intimate and multidimensional in minuscule way as God's is. So that's my best attempt. For all of my friends out there who are Bhakti devotees and people who may know better than I do, please, feel free to add to the conversation in the chat box. I really appreciate other people's thoughts on this too. Thank you so much for your great question. Hare Krishna.